Hey guys, this video is going to go on our Pilots in Japan playlist, but as you'll see, it's not specifically about Japan. It is about pilots and it is about flying. So what triggered this video is I'd posted some stuff on my other Facebook page, my silly old dude page, and that triggered a discussion with one of our patrons, one of our Japan channel patrons. So I thought it's always hard to explain some things in writing because it can take too long, so that's why it sort of justified a video. So first of all, I'll give you a little bit of background. I started flying about 40 years ago, started flying ultralights in Australia. That sort of led to getting a general aviation private pilot's license, and that led to getting a commercial pilot's license, which was never really a full-time job. It was sort of a part-time job in Australia, and included things like parachute drops and things like that. And then after moving to Japan, I got a Japanese pilot's license, so I fly in Japan. So in Australia, I also had aerobatic endorsement, so I did aerobatics in Australia, usually in a Cessna 152, which is pretty underpowered for aerobatics. It's an aerobatic aircraft. It's rated for aerobatics. It can take like 5 or 6 Gs positive and 4 or 5 Gs negative, so it's a pretty strong little aeroplane. It's a bit underpowered for aerobatics, but I did a lot of aerobatics in it, and I used to love it. Used to absolutely love it. I had a couple of friends who loved it too. There was always a few people with their hands up anytime I was going to go do aerobatics. There was always a couple of people that wanted to come. So I really enjoyed it. Also flew some aerobatics in a Tiger Moth. My old flying instructor was a Tiger Moth aerobatic pilot, and so we used to go now and again, go together and do aerobatics in a Tiger Moth. So I really love doing aerobatics, and I really do enjoy doing it. However, I had a policy that I never did any aerobatics under 3,000 feet. So usually I started at like 5,000 feet or 6,000 feet, and always made sure that I recovered and pulled out of whatever I was doing soon, by about 3,000 feet. The reason was that now and again, when you do aerobatics, now and again, if you make a mistake, right, which I did, I mean, a couple of memorable mistakes. One of them was I was doing a loop, and at the top of the loop I got too slow, and so the aeroplane was supposed to continue through the loop and come back out and complete the loop. But at the top of the loop I was going too slow, and it stopped moving forward and just started to fall, and ended up pulling, can't remember what it was, a couple of negative Gs, which is way too many negative Gs, very unpleasant, and the aeroplane was just falling upside down like that. And it's easy to recover from. All you got to do is pull back and wait, and it'll pull out at the bottom. But it takes a lot of altitude because you're falling upside down like that. And negative Gs mean, instead of positive Gs, which you normally pull in aerobatics, when you pull negative Gs, it's really unpleasant. So everything in your stomach comes up, and the blood goes to your head, so you can get a red out effect, and it's very unpleasant. But you just got to pull back and just wait until it pulls out the bottom. So the point of this is that I learnt from doing that and from making mistakes now and again. I mean, I made lots of other mistakes too at different times, but if you're doing it high up, you've got time to recover, and so it keeps it within the limits of what's safe. And then as long as you don't over-rev the engine or overstress the structure of the aeroplane, the risks are minimal. In the 152, probably a good chance that the engine could stop. That could happen. It never did, but it could. In which case I was out in the countryside, I could glide down and land. If it didn't restart, I could glide down and land. As long as I didn't overstress the aircraft past its structural limits, the thing wasn't going to break. And as long as I didn't over-rev the engine, that was another problem. If you over-rev the engine, it can throw it apart, and that can structurally damage the airplane as well. So as long as you stay within all the limits, then if you make a mistake, you've got enough room to fix it. Now the problem with air shows, and this is what this is all about, the problem with air shows is that they usually do all their stuff close to the ground. And the problem with that is that when a pilot makes a mistake close to the ground, doesn't have time to fix it. and you see it all the time. And so I made a couple of comments. It has been a thing of mine on the internet now and again when they report on another death at an air show. I have a thing that I post. If I remember, I'll show it to you right now. That I'll just put in the comment section underneath, and that inevitably gets people really upset because I say the word ban. People hate the word ban. It gives the impression of they feel like they're being repressed or something. That if you talk about banning something, however, banning things that are dangerous is a common thing in life, right? You know. If we stick to aviation, usually aviation is very controlled and very strict. If things are known to be dangerous, usually they're restricted or banned. You know, a pilot flying a commercial aircraft full of passengers is not allowed to do aerobatics, right? That's banned because it's considered to be dangerous, right? You know, flying aviation is usually very, very heavily regulated. If something's known to be dangerous, usually you're not allowed to do it, right? However, air shows are known to be dangerous. They did ban, in some places, doing manoeuvres over crowds or towards crowds is usually not allowed these days because because hundreds of people have died over the years with aircraft at air shows crashing into crowds and killing lots of people. So as a result of that now in air shows, usually what they do is they tell the pilots they're not allowed to do manoeuvres over the top of crowds or towards crowds, so that if they do crash, that they're not going to crash into the crowd, right? That's good, okay, that's great. However, it is inevitable. If at air shows you've got lots of aircraft flying close together, that's another thing. Usually in normal aircraft operations, there's considerable separation between aircraft that's always maintained for safety. So aircraft usually aren't allowed to fly close together. However, at air shows, lots of aircraft are flying close together, lots of aircraft in the pattern, lots of aircraft nearby, and then they're performing manoeuvres close to the ground that have narrow margins of error. And inevitably, if a pilot makes a mistake doing one of those manoeuvres close to the ground, he doesn't have time to recover. So any of those endless mistakes that I've made doing aerobatics, if those guys make them close to the ground, they won't have height to recover and they crash. And you see it all the time. You know, someone performs a loop and they're just a little bit too low coming out of the loop and they hit the ground and they die. You know, or all sorts of stuff. Anytime you see an aircraft accident, air show accident, usually that's what's happened, is the pilot's made some mistake. And, you know, inevitably in the media it gets reported that, you know, there's this accident and it's being investigated. You know what the outcome's going to be. Someone made a mistake and they didn't have enough height to recover. That's inevitably what it is at an air show. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. As long as they continue to have air shows, there will always be some pilots dying as a result. And most pilots that do air shows understand that if they make a mistake close to the ground, that they'll probably die. Most of them. Some of them probably don't, but some of them are probably just oblivious to it. But most pilots that do that sort of thing realise that if they make a mistake close to the ground, they'll probably die. And the people that organise air shows are fully aware that if someone makes a mistake, that they'll probably die. So it amazes me, first of all, that they're still allowed to have them. That you know, in aviation, that usually is so safe. You know, that everything's about safety in aviation usually. But when it comes to air shows, it seems that all the rules are sort of thrown aside and all the usual safety mechanisms are all pushed aside and okay, let's just go and do crazy stuff close to the ground. So, you know, I understand it. I understand why the pilots like to do aerobatics. I totally understand it. I love doing it. I haven't been able to do it in Japan, unfortunately, because I can't get my hands on an aircraft here that'll do it. So it's not going to happen here in Japan. But in Australia, I love doing it. It was my favourite thing. Every opportunity I got, every time the weather was right and I had the opportunity, off I went and did some aerobatics. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And if I go back to Australia for a visit again, I'll make sure I get a chance to do it again. I absolutely love it. I get it, totally get it, but not close to the ground. It's just not worth it. And the people who are supporting air shows are actually, You know, the pilots that are in air shows are accepting that there's a risk that they could die or that they could kill someone else, because that's the other thing that happens at air shows. Guys mess up, they hit someone else and someone else dies. The people that support air shows, including some people in my family that love going to air shows, that you're basically accepting, you are supporting something that there's a possibility that someone could die, right? And it amazes me when it's reported that everyone acts surprised, like it's a big tragedy, and it's a big tragedy. Well, yeah, I sort of get what they're saying when they say it's a tragedy, but they shouldn't call it a tragedy. They should say it's inevitable, and it was an inevitable accident, because statistically it is. If you continue to have air shows where you've got people doing all these manoeuvres, it's inevitable that there be more deaths. It's inevitable. So it's not really a tragic, unexpected thing. It's an inevitable thing. Statistically, it's inevitable. People will die at air shows. It's inevitable. So I don't get it. I don't get it. And then what happens is, if I do say and post that thing that if I remembered, I showed you that said ban air shows, people hate that word ban, you know. But it already, you know, travelling at higher than certain speeds in controlled airspaces is already banned, right? You know, when it comes to aviation, there's lots of things that are banned. And then inevitably, if I do leave that picture as a comment, inevitably you get all these people that, you know, that logic that says, oh, so what are you going to do next? Are you going to ban cars? Are you going to ban... One guy said on the recent one I posted, crocodiles kill people every year. Are you going to ban crocodiles? Which there's inevitably people are going to come up with sort of illogical sort of arguments like that. But to a certain extent, we already do. You know, driving a car faster than 100 kilometres an hour through a busy school zone or through a busy city street is already banned, right? There's already rules. So, okay, don't ban air shows. How about banning air shows where they perform under 3,000 feet? Because we already do that, exactly what we do with cars. You're not allowed to do car racing. So let's the analogy, if we want to do cars, let's do the analogy with cars and air shows and say you're not allowed to do stock car racing in city streets. So it's the same thing. That's already banned, isn't it? Crocodiles, you know, the guy, you're going to ban crocodiles? Well, you know, what you do is, if you know there's a watering hole where there's crocodiles, usually they put signs up and say no swimming, because there's crocodiles in there. I mean, this paranoia people have about banning stuff, that somehow that takes away our rights, you know. Life is full of things that we're not allowed to do because they're dangerous. In most civilized countries, kids aren't allowed to take guns to school, for example, because it's dangerous. So that's banned, right? Then you inevitably get when you talk about stuff like that, is that, yes, but people will still do it. Yes, but they'll do it less. And if air shows are not allowed, if a country bans air shows, then occasionally some aeroplanes will still crash, but less than what crash now with air shows. So, you know, the reason I made this video is you're going to get some people who, no matter how much logic you present or how much fact or information you give them, they'll never change their point of view. And that's fair enough. They can keep their point of view that, what are you going to ban next, crocodiles? I mean, you can't argue with people who think like that, right? That's fine. That's fine. This video was more for the guy I was talking to on Patreon, because he was asking about, he had some genuine questions. So this video is really for him. But if there's someone else who's watching this who at least now they've got a bit more information about how aerobatics works, and the inevitability of people dying in air shows, that hopefully there'll be a couple other people that realise, because there's a good chance air shows won't get banned in the near future, but it probably will eventually, when common sense starts to take over and, wait a minute, people are dying here for the entertainment of others, which is basically what it is. People risking their lives for the entertainment of other people. You know, you can't do that at a circus anymore because they have safety nets and things, you know. Logically, it's illogical. Air shows are illogical. However, if you're one of those people who totally support air shows, I have a cousin who just absolutely loves air shows. If you're one of those people who totally loves air shows, then you have to accept that you are supporting something that will inevitably result in people dying. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. And you can't call it a tragedy. You can't be surprised. You just have to call it inevitable. When someone dies in an air show, whether it be a pilot messing up and dying or a pilot messing up and killing someone else, when someone dies at an air show, you just have to accept that it's inevitable. And you can't be arguing that it's tragic or it's a shock or it's any of those other adjectives that they use when these things happen. And it's just like, well, of course it did. Of course it did. For me, there's absolutely zero surprise. Anytime you see an accident involving an air show, there's absolutely zero surprise. Like, yeah, of course someone died. Of course they did. So if you support air shows, you have to accept that. And accept that you're supporting it is one of the reasons that it happens. Because if people didn't go to air shows, they wouldn't hold them. So anyway, I knew this. I still not convinced I'm going to post this video. I've been on and off about this video all day because I know that when it comes to stuff like this, there's a good chance nobody changes their thinking on it. People who love air shows will continue to love them. It's not them that's going to die, or it's not the person they care about that's going to die, so probably most of them don't care anyway. But, you know, for our friend on Patreon that wanted to know my ideas about it, well, that was it. I think air shows just aren't worth it. They're just not worth it, you know. If they want to do aerobatics up above 3,000 feet, that's fine, but it's not as exciting enough, right? The crowds like the aeroplanes to come down low, so it's more exciting, so I don't see the point. But everybody else who has their own opinions, welcome to their opinion, of course. But just when someone dies, if you support air shows, when someone dies, you just have to put your hand up and go, yep, well, that's inevitable. That's going to keep happening. Say that. Don't say it's a tragedy or a surprise or something else. You know, it reminds me a little bit of the huge popularity in people climbing Mount Everest at the moment. You know, they go on those. They pay big money to go to climb Mount Everest, and then inevitably a certain percentage of them die. And then when they die, they call it a tragedy, and it's a surprise, and everybody acts surprised. And it's like, well, you know, it's not a surprise. It's inevitable, isn't it? A certain percentage will die. It's the same as air shows. You keep having air shows, there's a certain percentage of people are going to die as a result. It's just the way it is. So that's why I think they should be banned and that we shouldn't have them anymore. But other people are entitled to their opinions, as long as they're expressed politely, of course. We still get the occasional abusive comment underneath videos like this. There's no need to be abusive. We can have our opinion without being abusive, can't we? More videos coming soon.